The first thing Lady Beatrice Elloway learned that morning was that her father had ordered her portrait removed before the Duke arrived. Not moved to a dimmer wall, not replaced for cleaning, not sent to be reframed with the other family pictures whose gilt corners had begun to crack under age and candle smoke. Removed. The empty place in the long gallery of Mardale Court was waiting for her when she entered just after 8, a pale rectangle of unfaded wallpaper between a dead viscount with powdered hair and a countess famous for having married 3 fortunes and buried all of them. Outside the tall windows, the Surrey lawns lay silver beneath a thin February frost, but inside the gallery the air held the warmer scents of beeswax, dust, and old velvet. Beatrice stood very still. She did not touch the wall. She did not ask the footman on the ladder why her likeness had been taken down. She already knew. Lord Mardale disliked being reminded that his eldest daughter existed, and today he expected His Grace, Julian Harcourt, Duke of Lydmere. A duke must not be greeted by an embarrassment in oil paint. His lordship said the frame was unsuitable. "My lady," the footman murmured, his voice thin with apology. Beatrice turned her face just enough for him to see that she was not angry with him. People often expected anger from the wounded, as if humiliation fermented into cruelty by natural law. Beatrice had spent 26 years proving otherwise. "Then you must obey his lordship," she said quietly. "Take care with the canvas. My mother chose the blue ribbon in that gown." The footman lowered his eyes. "Yes, my lady." That was all. One more small erasure in a house built from erasures. Mardale Court had been praised in county journals for its noble restraint, its grey stone frontage, its yew walk, its chapel, its dining room large enough to seat 40 persons under painted cherubs who looked down upon debts, bargains, and polite lies. Every room declared lineage. Every corridor whispered inheritance. Yet Beatrice had always felt less like a daughter of the house than a useful shadow moving through it, correcting household accounts, answering invitations, soothing servants, mending mistakes before her father noticed them, and keeping Lady Cressida's gloves, ribbons, music, and little vanities arranged as if beauty itself required a clerk. Her younger sister's portrait still hung at the center of the gallery, naturally. Cressida in white muslin, Cressida with pearl combs in her shining hair, Cressida holding a rose as though flowers had been invented for her fingers. Beatrice did not begrudge her sister beauty. Beauty was no sin. The sin lay in the worship of it, and Mardale Court had made a chapel of Cressida's face. Beatrice drew her shawl closer around her shoulders and crossed to the escritoire set beneath her mother's portrait. It was a modest desk for such a grand room, but it had become her unofficial post. There were seating cards to revise for the dinner that evening, a letter from Lady Helena Vale to answer, 2 invoices to hide from her father until his temper cooled, and the latest packet from Lydmere House concerning the catalogue of Dutch and Italian miniatures the Duke's steward had requested help identifying. Beatrice had sent 3 pages of notes the previous week under the initials B.E., because initials were safer than a name. A name invited judgment. Initials allowed a mind to travel where a face might not be welcomed. She had not expected anyone at Lydmere House to notice the care she took, yet yesterday a brief reply had arrived in a hand too strong and controlled to belong to a clerk. The observation on the Van Dyck copy is unusually perceptive. If B.E. has further thoughts on the restoration sequence, they would be valued. Not appreciated. Valued. Beatrice had read the word twice, then folded the letter and placed it beneath her blotter like a dangerous kindness. She opened the drawer now and touched the edge of another object hidden there, smaller than her palm. The damaged portrait miniature lay wrapped in a square of worn silk. It showed her mother, Lady Mardale Elloway, before illness had thinned her and before Mardale Court had taught her to lower her voice. The painted face was oval, fair, and grave, with eyes that seemed always on the verge of saying something too tender to survive the room. The back of the miniature was worse than the front. Someone had scraped the ivory-colored backing with a blade or pin, leaving a wounded blur where words had once been. Beatrice had asked about it only once, when she was 16. Her father had gone so cold that she had never asked again. A sound broke the hush. Silver struck wood, then rolled across the floor in bright, accusing notes. Near the doorway, young Mary Pike, one of the undermaids, stood frozen over a fallen tray. 2 spoons, a sugar bowl, and a folded napkin lay scattered at her feet. The girl's face had gone as white as the frost beyond the glass. Beatrice glanced toward the far end of the gallery. Her father's study door remained closed, but Lord Mardale possessed a talent for hearing the mistakes of the powerless. "Pick up the spoons first," Beatrice said. Mary bent quickly, almost knocking her cap loose. "I'm sorry, my lady. I'm so sorry. Mrs. Bell said I was to bring the tray through, and I thought no one would be here, and I didn't see the corner of the carpet." "You saw it poorly because the runner is frayed," Beatrice said, crossing to her. "That is not a crime." Mary's hands trembled as she gathered the silver. "If his lordship hears, he'll send me off. He said last week there are too many girls in service who think clumsiness is a profession." Beatrice crouched, picked up the sugar bowl, and inspected the small dent on its rim. It was old. Older than Mary's fear, certainly. "Then his lordship shall hear that I struck the tray with my sleeve while reviewing the seating cards." Mary stared at her. "But, my lady, you didn't." "No," Beatrice said, setting the bowl back on the tray. "But I can survive being called careless. I am not certain you can survive being dismissed without a character." The girl's eyes filled before she could stop them. Beatrice looked away at once, granting the privacy of not witnessing gratitude too closely. Gratitude could humiliate when a person had already been frightened. "Take this to Mrs. Bell. Tell her the sugar bowl was already marked, and tell her I will speak to anyone who asks." "Thank you, my lady. I won't forget it." "You must," Beatrice said gently. Forgetting small kindnesses is often the only way servants remain safe in houses such as ours. Mary fled softly, tray held like a shield. Beatrice rose, brushed a faint trace of dust from her skirt, and returned to the escritoire. She had just begun replacing Lord Wetherby 2 seats farther from Cressida, because the old man was deaf and spoke too loudly of dowries, when the study door opened. Lord Alistair Elloway, Earl of Mardale, stepped into the gallery with his morning coat buttoned too tightly across a waist that had thickened from port and worry. He was still handsome in the way hard men often remained handsome after gentleness had left them, with silver at his temples and eyes the color of winter water. Those eyes passed over the empty space where Beatrice's portrait had hung and showed satisfaction. Then they moved to Beatrice herself and sharpened. "Why are you here?" he asked. "The seating plan required correction, Papa. Your sister should not be placed near Lord Wetherby. I have already moved him. And Lady Farnham? At your right. She will consider it an honor and repeat that impression throughout London by Thursday." Lord Mardale paused. Competence irritated him most when it came from her. "Do not be clever today." Beatrice lowered her gaze to the cards. "I shall endeavor to be useful instead." Usefulness includes absence when required. His attention dropped to the drawer she had not fully closed. For one brief moment, the color around his mouth changed. "What have you there?" Beatrice placed her hand lightly over the drawer. "Only correspondence." "From whom?" "Lydmere House." The name did what she expected. Her father's posture adjusted by half an inch, not softening, exactly, but arranging itself for ambition. "The Duke's steward." The reply bore his Grace's hand. She should not have said it. The words had slipped out before caution caught them. Lord Mardale stared at her as if a chair had spoken. "His Grace wrote to you." "To B.E., Beatrice corrected. "About the miniature catalogue. Then he does not know it is you." It was not a question. "I do not believe so." Relief crossed his face, followed quickly by calculation. "Good. It will remain that way. Men like Lydmere value rarity in paintings, not oddity in women." Beatrice felt the sentence land, clean and familiar. It found the bruise because it had made the bruise. Still, she kept her hand steady. "I had no intention of troubling His Grace." "You will not trouble him. You will not linger when he arrives. You will not offer opinions unless directly commanded. You will not make one of your strained observations about art, books, servants, morality, or whatever else you have mistaken for charm." The frost outside seemed to brighten until the windows looked almost white. Beatrice folded one seating card over another. "As you wish. Cressida must shine today. Cressida usually does. Because she knows what she is for." At that, Beatrice looked up. The old ache moved through her, but it did not bow her head. Her father disliked that most of all, the fact that she had never learned to collapse prettily. Before he could speak again, hurried steps sounded beyond the gallery. A footman appeared at the doorway, breathless from crossing too much polished floor too quickly. "My lord." Lord Mardale turned, annoyed by urgency in a servant. "What is it?" The footman swallowed. "A carriage has passed the South Lodge. His Grace has arrived early." For the first time that morning, Lord Mardale looked truly unprepared. Beatrice's fingers closed around the edge of the desk, and inside the half-open drawer, wrapped in faded silk, her mother's damaged miniature waited like a secret that had just heard its name. Lord Mardale recovered himself with the speed of a man who had spent a lifetime pretending debt was strategy and cruelty was discipline. His startled expression vanished before the footman had finished breathing. "Then why are you standing here with your mouth open?" he said. "Have Mr. Bell receive his Grace at the front entrance. The blue drawing-room is to be opened, not the green. Tell cook the second course must be delayed by half an hour. Where is Lady Cressida?" "In the morning-room, my lord," the footman said. "With Mrs. Fenton arranging her hair. Then send word that she is to come down at once. Not hurried. Graceful." The footman bowed and disappeared. For several seconds, the gallery held only the ticking of the long case clock near the east window. Beatrice did not move. She had learned long ago that when her father grew calm too quickly, every word that followed would be chosen to cut without leaving evidence. Lord Mardale turned back to her. "You will go to your room." Beatrice closed the drawer with care. The soft click sounded louder than it should have. "The seating cards are not finished." "They are finished enough. Lady Farnham cannot be seated beside Sir Edmund Vale. They quarrelled over the charity subscription last spring, and she has not forgiven him. Then put a vase between them. That may not silence her. Neither will your presence." His eyes went to the shawl over her shoulders, the plain morning gown of grey wool, the single ribbon at her throat. "Look at yourself." Beatrice kept her face still. She did not look at herself. She knew what he saw. A woman too tall to be delicate, too quiet to be charming, too marked by that pale stain along her left cheek to be called pretty by anyone who feared contradiction. She had once tried powders. She had once tried veils. She had once tried lowering her head so the candlelight would not catch the color of her skin unevenly. Each effort had taught her the same lesson. Shame did not make one less visible. It merely taught cruel people where to look first. "I am dressed appropriately for the morning," she said. "Appropriate for correspondence. Not for a duke. I had no intention of presenting myself to his Grace. You had every intention of doing whatever your stubborn little conscience directs you to do. That is why you are dangerous." Beatrice's fingers tightened once, then relaxed over the edge of the escritoire. "Dangerous? Yes. A plain woman with opinions is always dangerous. She mistakes notice for respect and contradiction for intelligence." A flush rose along Beatrice's throat, but not because she believed him. That was the small mercy of repeated injury. After a time, some words no longer convinced. They only hurt because someone who should have loved you had chosen them. Lord Mardale stepped nearer. "The Duke of Lydmere is not one of your catalogue papers. He is not a book to be annotated. He is the most important guest this house has received in years. Your sister's future may depend upon this visit, and I will not have you spoil it with your long face and moral airs. Cressida's future is not in my hands. Everything in this family is in your hands when you choose to make a spectacle of disappointment." That sentence should have been absurd. Beatrice almost smiled at the sheer injustice of it. She had spent her life making herself smaller, quieter, easier to pass by. Still, she was accused of spectacle. "I have never asked to be noticed." "No," he said softly. "That is what makes you so tiresome. You want people to discover you without your having to compete. You stand in corners with your wounded dignity and expect the world to repent." Beatrice looked toward the empty wall where her portrait had been. A faint line of dust marked the place where the frame had hung. Even absence left proof if one knew how to see it. "I expect nothing of the world, Papa." "Good. Then expect nothing of Lydmere." His gaze dropped again to the drawer. Open that. Beatrice did not move. There is nothing there that concerns you. A silence entered the room. It was thin and sharp. Open it. She opened the drawer because refusal would bring servants, and servants would bring witnesses, and her father was at his worst when forced to perform gentleness before inferiors. The folded silk lay in the corner beneath the Duke's letter. Lord Mardale reached past the correspondence and took the small bundle. Beatrice felt the motion in her chest as if he had touched a living thing. Please, she said before she could stop herself. His mouth curved. He liked that word from her. He liked any word that proved he had found a tender place. So there remains something in this world you can plead for. It was Mama's. It belongs to the family. She gave it to me. Your mother gave many things she had no judgment to give. He unwrapped the silk. Lady Mirabel's painted face appeared in his palm, luminous even under the grey morning light. For an instant, something passed through Lord Mardale's expression that was not anger. It may have been fear. It may have been memory. It may have been hatred for both. Then he turned the miniature over and saw the scraped backing. His thumb covered the damaged place at once. Too quickly. Beatrice saw it. Why do you always hide that side? She asked. The question escaped quietly, but it changed the air. Lord Mardale looked up. What did you say? The back of it. Whenever you see it, you cover the scratches. Because it is defaced and ugly. Who defaced it? His hand closed around the miniature. Not harshly enough to break it. Carefully enough to keep it. That frightened her more. You have been indulged too long, he said. By whom? Beatrice asked. Not by you. The words were not loud. They were not even angry. Yet the moment they left her, she knew she had gone too far. Lord Mardale's face hardened into the expression that had made tenants bow, servants vanish, and Cressida weep prettily until forgiven. Beatrice did none of those things. She stood beside the desk, pale but upright, and waited for the punishment to arrive in whatever polished form he preferred. You think yourself wronged, he said. You think because your mother was sentimental, because servants pity you, because some clerk at Lydmere House praised your little notes, that you are owed a life different from the one Providence assigned you. I think I am owed the truth about what belongs to me. Nothing belongs to you. He placed the miniature on the desk, still under his hand. Not this house. Not your mother's name. Not a man's admiration. Not the future your sister may yet secure if you have the decency not to stand in her light. Beatrice looked at his hand over her mother's face. I have never stood in Cressida's light. I have only lived in the shadow you gave me. The study door at the far end of the gallery had not been closed after the footman left. Beyond it, somewhere in the corridor that led from the front hall, came the faint sound of male voices. One belonged to Mr. Bell, the butler, measured and respectful. The other was lower, unfamiliar, and impossible to place at that distance. Lord Mardale did not seem to hear it. His attention had narrowed to Beatrice. Listen carefully, he said. If His Grace sees you, he will be courteous because he is a gentleman. You will mistake courtesy for interest because women like you are starved for it. Then you will imagine yourself tragic when he turns, as all sensible men do, toward beauty, youth, and ease. I am aware of what men value. No. You are aware of what you lack. Beatrice's breath moved once, shallowly. Her father leaned closer, his voice dropping until it became almost intimate in its cruelty. You are too ugly to be loved. The words did not echo. They seemed instead to enter every old frame, every polished floorboard, every inch of empty wall where her portrait had been, as if the house had finally said aloud what it had always believed. Beatrice felt her hand reach for the miniature before she gave it permission. Her fingers touched the edge of the silk. Lord Mardale lifted his hand away, not because he relented, but because he had made his point and expected her to break around it. She did not. She picked up the miniature, wrapped it once, and held it against her palm. It was warm from his hand. That felt like a violation she could not name. May I go now? She asked. Lord Mardale's eyes flickered. Her calm offended him more than tears would have. You may go to your room. You will remain there until I send for you. If Lady Cressida requires assistance, you will provide it through Mrs. Fenton. You will not enter the blue drawing room. You will not pass the front hall. You will not write another word to Lydmere House under those initials. Do you understand? Beatrice inclined her head. Perfectly. Do not use that tone with me. I have used no tone, Papa. You use silence as if it were virtue. Sometimes it is only survival. For one dangerous second, he looked as though he might answer with something too honest for either of them to bear. Then a board gave a soft sound beyond the open study door. Not the random sigh of old wood. A step. Lord Mardale turned. Beatrice turned more slowly. In the shadowed threshold beyond the gallery, a tall gentleman stood motionless, his dark travelling coat still dusted from the road, one gloved hand resting on the carved frame of the door. His face was composed, but there was nothing mild in it. The stranger's gaze passed from Lord Mardale's stiff posture to the miniature in Beatrice's hand, then to the empty rectangle on the wall where her portrait had once hung. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm enough to chill the room. Then, my lord, you and I differ on what is worthy of love. Lord Mardale went still in a way that made the entire gallery seem to shrink around him. For the first time in Beatrice's memory, her father had no answer ready. The gentleman in the doorway did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The cut of his travelling coat, the plain perfection of his gloves, the grave control of his bearing, and the butler hovering several paces behind him with the anxious helplessness of a servant who knew rank had already outrun protocol, all declared who he was before any formal introduction could rescue the room. His Grace, Julian Harcourt, Duke of Lydmere, had not arrived like a suitor. He had arrived like judgment with excellent manners. Lord Mardale recovered enough to bow. Your Grace. You honour us, though I regret you were misdirected. The blue drawing room was prepared for your reception. The Duke's gaze did not leave Beatrice at once. It rested on her face, not as other gazes did, searching for the mark and then politely pretending not to have found it. He looked at her as if he were taking in the whole of her presence, the grey gown, the rigid fingers around the silk-wrapped miniature, the empty wall behind her, and the composure that had cost more than any jewel in the house. Only then did he turn to her father. I was not misdirected. I followed voices. Lord Mardale's colour altered. A regrettable family matter, I assure you. My daughter has a tendency toward excessive feeling. Does she? The Duke asked. The question was mild. It was also merciless. Beatrice felt the miniature press into her palm. She wished she could vanish. She wished, with equal force, that she could remain exactly where she stood until the floor gave way beneath someone other than herself. Your Grace, she said, because silence had become unbearable, my father did not expect you to enter by this side of the house. So I gathered. His eyes returned to her. Lady Beatrice Elloway, I believe. It was strange how her own name sounded different in his mouth. Not softened. Not pitied. Simply acknowledged. Yes, Your Grace. Lord Mardale moved half a step forward, reclaiming the scene. My eldest daughter assists with household papers. It keeps her occupied. Lady Cressida, whom you were meant to meet, will join us directly. She is a far more suitable representative of the family. I did not ask for a representative. The Duke removed his gloves with unhurried precision. I asked Lord Grantham last month who had corrected the attribution of the small Van Mieris in my late father's catalogue. He told me the note had come from Mardale Court. Initials only. B.E. Beatrice's heart gave a hard, startled movement. Lord Mardale's face closed. A trivial matter. It saved me from purchasing a false restoration at considerable expense. The Duke glanced toward the escritoire, then back to Beatrice. The note also observed that a painting can be damaged twice. Once by the person who wounds it, and again by the person who pretends the wound was always there. Beatrice remembered writing that line. She had written it at midnight by a low candle, thinking of the scraped back of her mother's miniature and not of the Duke's collection at all. She had not imagined the words would be read by him. She had certainly not imagined he would remember them here, in front of her father. I did not know the papers would reach your Grace personally, she said. That does not make them less yours. Lord Mardale gave a short laugh. It was meant to sound indulgent and failed. My daughter reads too much into old objects. Women sometimes form attachments to scraps and portraits. It is harmless when contained. The Duke turned his head slightly. Is that what you were doing when I entered, my lord? Containing her? The butler lowered his eyes. Beatrice felt heat climb under her skin, but she would not look away. Lord Mardale's mouth tightened. You overheard a private correction and have mistaken it for cruelty. No, the Duke said. I overheard cruelty dressed as correction. There is a difference. A sound came from the far end of the gallery. Lady Cressida Elloway had arrived in pale blue silk, her hair arranged in a soft crown of curls that made her look like a painting already approved by society. Behind her, Mrs. Fenton hovered with a ribbon box, then stopped short when she saw the Duke in the gallery instead of the drawing room. Cressida's eyes moved from her father to Beatrice, then to the Duke. She understood only one thing at first. The Duke was not looking at her. Your Grace, she said quickly, dropping into a graceful curtsy. We were told you had arrived. I hope the road from London was not too disagreeable. The road was tolerable, Lady Cressida. His courtesy was exact and empty. The arrival has been more instructive. Cressida's smile trembled. Lord Mardale seized the opening. Lady Cressida has long admired your family's work in the arts, Your Grace. She is accomplished in music, watercolor, French conversation, and all the graces expected in a household of consequence. I do not doubt it. The Duke's reply offered no foothold. Yet I came with a particular question, and it is not one Lady Cressida can answer. The air changed. Beatrice felt it before she understood it. Lord Mardale did too. A question, he said. Concerning that object. The Duke looked at the silk in Beatrice's hand. May I? Beatrice hesitated. No gentleman had ever asked permission to examine something she held. Men in her father's world took things, judged them, and returned them altered by possession. The Duke waited. His stillness gave the choice back to her. Slowly, she unwrapped the miniature and placed it on the escritoire rather than in his hand. It was a small act, but he noticed. A faint recognition crossed his features as he bent to inspect the painted face, then the damaged back. He did not touch the scraped surface. This resembles the veil miniatures, he said. Lady Cressida looked confused. Lord Mardale looked sharply away. Beatrice heard the silence after that sentence as if it had been struck like a bell. My mother was born a Vale, she said. Lady Mirabel Vale, before her marriage. Yes. The Duke straightened. My mother owned 2 pieces by the same artist. Both bore inscriptions on the reverse. They were never merely ornaments. They were records of affection, inheritance, or obligation. This one has no inscription, Lord Mardale said. Too quickly. It is defaced. So I see. The Duke's voice cooled. The question is by whom, and why? Lord Mardale stepped between Beatrice and the desk, but the movement only made his unease more visible. Your Grace, if you wish to discuss art, I would be glad to show you the drawing-room pieces. If you wish to discuss family connection, Lady Cressida is prepared to receive your attention properly. Cressida's cheeks colored at the bluntness, but she did not protest. She looked at Beatrice instead, and for once there was something more complicated than vanity in her expression. Fear, perhaps. Or the beginning of resentment. The Duke looked from father to daughter, then to Beatrice. I did come to discuss family connection. Lord Mardale smiled with relief too soon. Then we are agreed. Not yet. The Duke's words fell cleanly. I came prepared to consider whether an alliance with House Elloway might be desirable. I find that it may be, but not in the direction you have assumed. Beatrice felt her breath leave her. Cressida's ribbon box slipped from Mrs. Fenton's hands and landed softly on the carpet, spilling blue satin onto the floor like a quiet disaster. Lord Mardale stared. Your Grace cannot mean, I can. The Duke turned fully toward Beatrice. His face remained composed, but there was a gravity in it that made mockery impossible. Lady Beatrice, I will not pretend that what I heard did not influence me. It did. Injustice should influence any gentleman worthy of the name. But I had read your mind before I heard your pain. I had admired your judgment before I knew your face. And now that I have seen how you stand beneath insult, I find my opinion strengthened rather than altered." Beatrice could not speak. The room blurred at its edges, yet the Duke remained clear. "My lord," he said, addressing her father without removing the choice from her, "I ask permission to make a formal offer for Lady Beatrice Elloway's hand, subject entirely to the lady's consent." No one moved. The words did not explode. They settled. That made them worse for Lord Mardale, because settled words could not be gathered back. Beatrice looked at her father and saw his ambition collide with his contempt. He could not refuse a duke without consequence. He could not accept without losing control of the daughter he had trained himself to despise. Cressida's eyes shone, but whether with tears or fury, Beatrice could not tell. "This is absurd," Lord Mardale said at last. "Lady Beatrice has no beauty to recommend her, no social ease, no proper dowry arrangement yet settled, and no preparation for such a role." "Then it is fortunate," the Duke said, "that I am not seeking a porcelain figure for a mantle." Beatrice's fingers tightened against the desk. A laugh almost escaped her, not from amusement but from shock. She swallowed it back. "Your Grace," she said softly, "you have placed me in a difficult position." "I know." His eyes met hers. "I regret the difficulty. I do not regret the question. You cannot know me." "No. But I know enough to wish to begin honestly." Lord Mardale broke in, his voice low with warning. "Beatrice, you will not embarrass this family by indulging a theatrical impulse." For the first time, the Duke's restraint sharpened into visible displeasure. "My lord, I advise you not to answer for her again." The Earl of Mardale was not accustomed to being advised in his own gallery. Yet a duke stood before him, and rank pressed upon the room like weather. Beatrice looked down at the miniature. Her mother's painted eyes seemed to hold the light. She did not trust this miracle. She did not trust miracles at all. But she trusted the difference between a door and a cage, and for the first time in years, a door had opened. "I cannot give an answer this morning," she said. Her voice trembled once, then steadied. "Not to a question that will alter every life in this house." The Duke bowed, and there was respect in the motion. "Then I will wait for an answer given freely." Lord Mardale's smile returned, thin and poisonous. "How noble! Yet before your Grace grows too enchanted by injured dignity, you should understand that my eldest daughter carries debts with her. Complications. Damaged goods are rarely inexpensive." The Duke's gaze did not leave Beatrice. "Then we shall discuss the debts." Only then did he turn back to Lord Mardale, and his voice became quieter than before. "But I warn you, my lord, I have a particular dislike of men who confuse damage with worth." The blue drawing-room had been prepared for triumph and received humiliation instead. The fires had been stirred high, the silver tea service polished until it reflected every trembling hand, and the pale damask chairs arranged to flatter Lady Cressida when she entered beneath the best light from the south windows. Yet it was Beatrice who was led there first, not as a daughter proudly presented, but as the difficulty no one could dismiss. Lord Mardale walked ahead with his shoulders rigid. The Duke followed with the unhurried authority of a man who did not need to prove he owned the room in order to command it. Beatrice came last, the miniature tucked inside her closed hand, feeling the scraped backing through silk as if the small hidden wound had become a second pulse. Cressida entered moments later, still beautiful, still pale with shock, and took the chair nearest the harp without touching its strings. "Mrs. Fenton hovered by the door until Lord Mardale dismissed her with a glance. The butler withdrew. The door remained open by several inches, because even outrage had rules when a duke sat in the house. "Your Grace," Lord Mardale began, with a smile that looked painful to hold, "before this extraordinary conversation proceeds any further, I must insist upon clarity. A gentleman may speak impulsively when moved by an unfortunate scene, but marriage settlements are not made from sentiment." "They should not be made from concealment either," the Duke replied. "Then we are in agreement. You must know what Lady Beatrice brings with her." Beatrice heard the emphasis. Brings. Not who she was. Not what she might become. Only the inventory of burden. "My father means to say I bring very little," she said before she could lose courage. Lord Mardale's eyes flashed toward her. "I mean to say that a duke should be spared misunderstanding." I prefer truth to being spared, the Duke said. Then truth is simple. Lady Beatrice has no considerable dowry prepared. Her mother's portion was modest and absorbed into the family's needs many years ago. Her prospects have never justified the expense of an ambitious settlement. Cressida, on the other hand, has been properly provided for. The cruelty was smooth enough to pass for administration. Beatrice looked at the tea tray, at the tiny reflection of her own hand in the silver pot, and wondered how many women had been reduced in rooms like this by men using words such as provided, suitable, modest, and absorbed. The Duke did not look at Cressida. I will have my solicitor review any settlements before an agreement is signed. Lord Mardale's smile sharpened. Naturally. Yet I would not wish Lady Beatrice to be embarrassed by scrutiny. Some accounts are untidy. Untidy accounts do not embarrass me. Hidden ones do. Silence answered that. It was not loud, but it was heavy. Cressida shifted in her chair, the silk of her gown whispering against the cushion. Papa only means to protect the family, she said softly. People will talk if this is handled poorly. Beatrice glanced at her sister. Cressida's eyes shone with hurt, but beneath it there was calculation, or perhaps fear wearing calculation's mask. People will talk regardless, Beatrice said. They always have. Not like this. Cressida looked at the Duke, then quickly away. Not when a man of his Grace's rank chooses in a manner no one expects. The Duke's voice remained even. I have never found expectation a reliable judge of worth. Lord Mardale tapped one finger on the arm of his chair. Fine phrases do not settle property, Your Grace. No. Solicitors do. Mine will write by tomorrow. Until then, I require 3 conditions. Lord Mardale's expression hardened. Require? Yes. The Duke leaned back slightly, composed and absolute. First, Lady Beatrice will not be treated as a household inconvenience while this matter is under consideration. Second, any correspondence addressed to or from her concerning my household will not be intercepted. Third, the miniature she holds remains in her possession unless she chooses otherwise. Beatrice's hand closed more tightly around the silk. Her father did not look at her. He looked only at the Duke, and in that look she saw him measuring loss. That object is a family piece, Lord Mardale said. Then your family should be proud to see it in the hand of your daughter. You know nothing of its history. Not yet. The words were mild, but Lord Mardale's face changed by the smallest degree. Beatrice saw it because she had spent years studying the weather of his displeasure. The Duke saw it too. That realization unsettled her more than the offer itself. He noticed what others missed. He noticed too much. Tea was poured by a footman who had clearly been summoned in haste, and no one drank it. Lord Mardale spoke of propriety. The Duke spoke of formal calls, consent, and the need for a proper chaperone if Beatrice were to be received in London. Cressida sat very straight, smiling whenever the Duke's glance approached her and fading each time it passed by. Beatrice answered only when directly asked, but each answer seemed to displease her father because it proved she had a voice at all. When at last Lord Mardale excused himself to send word to his solicitor, he paused behind Beatrice's chair. You will remember, he said, softly enough to make the words appear private, that astonishment is not affection. The Duke stood at once. My lord, if you have counsel for Lady Beatrice, give it where it may be heard plainly. Lord Mardale bowed with admirable control. A father's concern, Your Grace. Nothing more. Then it will survive daylight. The Earl left the room. Cressida remained a moment longer, her fingers twisting the ribbon at her wrist. When the Duke moved toward the window to give the sisters the appearance of privacy, she leaned close to Beatrice. You think this is rescue, she whispered. It isn't. Scholars love puzzles until they solve them. Then they put them in cabinets. Beatrice looked at her sister's beautiful face and heard the fear beneath the spite. Is that what you think I am? That is what men think we all are, if we are not careful. Then why are you angry that he did not choose you? Cressida flinched as if the question had reached farther than intended. Because I was prepared, she said. And you never were. She rose before Beatrice could answer, curtsied to the Duke, and left with wounded dignity practiced to perfection. The room felt larger without her and more dangerous. Beatrice stood because remaining seated seemed too much like surrender. "Your Grace, may I speak honestly? I would be disappointed if you did not. Did you ask because you pitied me?" His answer did not come quickly. That, at least, felt honest. "No, because my father angered you." "In part." Her throat tightened. "That is not comforting. It was not meant to be. Anger brought me through the doorway. It did not make me ask the question." He came no closer, and she was grateful for that restraint. "I had read your notes before today. I had admired your judgment. I knew the initials BE belonged to someone who could see beneath varnish and reputation. Then I arrived and heard a man attempt to convince that same mind it was unworthy of tenderness." Beatrice looked down at the miniature. "Tenderness is a dangerous word in this house. Then I will use it carefully." The quietness of that promise nearly undid her. She steadied herself against the back of the chair. "You cannot know whether I would make you a good duchess. No, you cannot know whether I would make you a good wife. No, then what do you know?" The Duke's gaze held hers without demand. "I know I do not want a grateful wife. I know I do not want a porcelain figure placed at the head of my table. I know I would rather begin with uncertainty honestly named than certainty purchased by vanity." Beatrice wanted to believe him. That was the danger. Hope, when it came after long deprivation, did not arrive like sunlight. It arrived like a match in a room full of dry paper. "If I consider your offer," she said, "it must not be as charity. It will not. Or revenge against my father. It will not. Or curiosity about my mother's miniature." This time his pause was longer. "The miniature troubles me. I will not pretend otherwise. But you are not an object in my collection, Lady Beatrice." Her breath caught at the exact place pride tried to hold it. Beyond the open door, distant footsteps crossed the hall. Life in Mardale Court had resumed its careful pretending. "Then I will consider," she said. "That is all I can give." The Duke bowed. "Then that is all I will take." Later, when the house had divided into whispers and Cressida's harp remained untouched in the drawing room, Lord Mardale sat at his study desk with the door locked. He did not ring for a servant. He wrote the letter himself in a narrow, urgent hand, sanded it, sealed it, and addressed it to the solicitor who had managed the Elloway accounts since Lady Mirabel's death. The final line dried darker than the rest. "No papers concerning Lady Beatrice's maternal settlement are to be produced without my direct instruction. If any inquiry comes from Lydmere House, delay it. At any cost." By the time Lady Beatrice Elloway reached Mayfair, London had already decided what it thought of her. It had not met her, of course. That was unnecessary. London could ruin a woman with remarkable confidence on evidence no stronger than a whisper passed between two fans at Gunter's, a raised eyebrow in a carriage, or a line in a society column printed small enough to seem harmless and sharp enough to draw blood. The Elloway carriage turned into Half Moon Street beneath a grey afternoon sky, its wheels hissing over damp stones, while Beatrice sat opposite Lady Helena Vale and kept one gloved hand closed around the damaged miniature in her reticule. Her aunt had insisted upon accompanying her from Surrey after receiving Lord Mardale's stiff letter announcing that Beatrice would require female supervision during this temporary disturbance. Lady Helena had read the phrase aloud, smiled without warmth, and arrived at Mardale Court the following morning with 2 trunks, a cane she did not need, and the air of a woman who had outlived several men's attempts to manage her. "Temporary disturbance," Lady Helena had said as the carriage left the estate road. "That is what selfish men call a woman's future when it inconveniences them." Beatrice had almost smiled then. Almost. Now, as the London house came into view, narrow, polished, and respectable behind its black iron railings, she felt the old shrinking begin under her ribs. Not fear exactly. Preparation. It was what she had always done before entering a room that had been told to judge her. Lady Helena watched her from beneath a bonnet trimmed in dark violet ribbon. She was her mother's elder cousin, though she had the right by affection to be called aunt, and there was something in the angle of her nose and the gravity of her eyes that made Beatrice think of Lady Mirabel's miniature restored to age and command. "Do not brace yourself so visibly, child," Lady Helena said. "It gives fools the satisfaction of thinking they are dangerous." "I am not bracing." My dear, your spine looks as though it has been summoned before Parliament. This time Beatrice did smile, though faintly. London has been told I am a curiosity. London has survived worse disappointments. The footman opened the carriage door. Cold city air entered with the smell of coal smoke, wet leather, and horses. Beatrice stepped down and looked up at the house that would serve as her place in society while the Duke's offer remained under consideration. Not accepted. Not refused. Suspended, like breath. Lord Mardale had wanted her kept in Surrey, but His Grace's conditions had been precise. Lady Beatrice was to have a suitable chaperone. She was to receive calls properly. She was to be treated as a lady whose answer mattered. That last part had frightened her father most. The first morning call arrived before Beatrice had removed her travelling cloak. By noon, the drawing-room looked less like a private room than a viewing gallery with teacups. Lady Farnham came first, stout, jewelled, and smiling with the fixed sweetness of preserved fruit. She was followed by Mrs. Dalrymple, whose daughter had once been rumoured a possible match for the Duke of Lydmere, and by Lady Winford, who touched every scandal with 2 fingers and then claimed she had never held it. They sat beneath a painting of a storm-tossed ship, accepted tea, and looked at Beatrice in brief, controlled glances that always returned to the left side of her face. Beatrice poured without spilling. That felt like victory enough for the first quarter hour. You must find London overwhelming after so much time in the country, Lady Farnham said. Mardale Court is not quite wilderness, Beatrice replied. Though my father would be interested to learn it has been demoted. Lady Helena's mouth twitched. Mrs. Dalrymple leaned forward. How droll. And yet one hears you have always preferred quieter occupations. Catalogues, letters, little household tasks. Such useful habits. Useful. The old word came dressed in new lace. They do pass the time, Beatrice said. Lady Winford lifted her cup. How fortunate His Grace values unusual accomplishments. Most gentlemen are so easily led by beauty. The pause afterward was deliberate. It invited Beatrice to blush, apologize, or pretend not to understand. She did none of these things. Most gentlemen are led by what they are taught to admire, she said. That is not always beauty. Lady Farnham's fan opened. And what do you suppose the Duke has been taught to admire? Before Beatrice could answer, the drawing-room door opened again, and Lady Cressida Elloway entered as though the question itself had summoned her. She wore pale rose silk, soft enough to make the room look harsh around her, and behind her came admiration as naturally as perfume. Her curtsy was faultless. Her eyes went first to the visitors, then to Beatrice, then to Lady Helena, whose expression cooled by a single degree. I hope I am not intruding, Cressida said. Papa thought I should call. He worries Beatrice may find the attention difficult. Lady Helena set down her cup. How considerate of your father to send another daughter to measure the first one's discomfort. Cressida's smile faltered, then returned. I only meant to be kind. Then you have chosen a challenging costume for it, Lady Helena said. Beatrice looked down to hide the dangerous possibility of laughter. Lady Farnham seized the new arrangement with relish. How charming to see sisters together at such a moment. Lady Cressida, you must be relieved that the matter has remained within the family. Some young ladies would find it painful to be overlooked. Cressida's lashes lowered. I want only what is best for my sister. It was beautifully said. It made Beatrice sound like a charitable obligation. Mrs. Dalrymple turned to Beatrice with the gentle cruelty of a woman certain she would be forgiven for it. And do you feel equal to such a position, Lady Beatrice? The Duchess of Lydmere will be much observed. Every mark, every gesture, every gown, every expression. Nothing escapes notice at that rank. There it was. Not quite the wound, but a finger placed near it. Beatrice felt the room lean in. Even the maid by the tea-table had gone still. No, Beatrice said. I do not imagine much escapes notice. Mrs. Dalrymple blinked, surprised by the lack of pleading. Then you understand my concern. I understand that scrutiny is often mistaken for judgment by those who enjoy performing both. The silence that followed was not admiration yet. It was adjustment. A woman dismissed as plain had spoken like a person with teeth. Lady Farnham's fan slowed. Cressida looked sharply at Beatrice, not angry now but alarmed. The door opened once more. This time the footman did not need to announce the visitor before everyone in the room felt the change. The Duke of Lydmere entered in a dark coat cut with austere elegance, his expression calm, his eyes taking in the arrangement of guests, sisters, cups, and traps in one sweep. Every woman rose or inclined as rank required. Beatrice stood too quickly, then wished she had not. His gaze found her for the briefest moment. It did not pity. It steadied. "Your Grace," Lady Helena said. "You arrive at an instructive hour. I begin to suspect most hours in London are instructive if one listens at the door before entering." Lady Farnham laughed a little too brightly. "We were only becoming acquainted with dear Lady Beatrice." "Were you?" the Duke asked. "How ambitious of you." Mrs. Dalrymple coloured. Beatrice should not have enjoyed that. She did. The Duke crossed not to Cressida, though her posture invited it, but to the painting above the mantel. It showed a woman in a dark green gown holding a closed letter, her face turned away from a window. "Lady Beatrice," he said, "will you indulge a question?" The room sharpened. Beatrice felt every glance shift to her. "If I can, Your Grace. This portrait has been attributed to Reynolds in the old family list. I have doubted it for years. What do you see?" It was not a rescue in the ordinary sense. He did not tell the ladies they had been unkind. He did not shield Beatrice behind masculine outrage. He placed a lantern in her hand and let the room discover she could hold it. Beatrice looked at the painting. At first she saw only the danger of answering wrongly. Then training, instinct, and love of neglected things came to her aid. "Not Reynolds," she said. "The hands are too timidly rendered, and the shadow at the throat lacks his confidence. But the face has been studied with care. I would say it is the work of a painter who admired him and feared being found out." The Duke's mouth changed almost imperceptibly. "And the closed letter?" Beatrice stepped nearer, forgetting the room for one precious second. "That is the heart of it. She is not waiting to receive news. She has already received it and chosen not to open it in company. Why? Because whatever is inside will alter her conduct, and she wishes to remain mistress of herself for one moment longer." The silence this time was different. Lady Farnham did not move. Mrs. Dalrymple looked at the painting as if it had betrayed her by becoming interesting. Cressida's lovely face had gone still. The Duke turned from the portrait to the room. "Lady Beatrice sees what others merely look at." The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Beatrice lowered her eyes, but not before warmth moved through her so suddenly that it felt almost like pain. For years, rooms had fallen silent because people had noticed what was wrong with her. Today, one had fallen silent because a duke had asked what was right. Lady Helena reached for her tea with great composure. "More sugar, Lady Farnham?" she asked. "You look as though you need reviving." At that precise moment, on a tray in a printer's shop 3 streets away, a damp sheet of society paragraphs lay drying beside an inkwell. The newest line had already been set. "The Pitty Bride of Lydmere." The invitation to Lydmere House arrived the following morning on paper so thick that Lady Helena tapped it against her palm and declared it more substantial than most gentlemen's promises. Beatrice read the message twice before allowing herself to believe the words were truly there. His Grace requested the honour of Lady Helena Vale's company and Lady Beatrice Elloway's presence at 3 o'clock, for the purpose of viewing several miniatures in his late mother's collection that might bear relation to a piece presently in Lady Beatrice's care. Presently in her care. Not belonging to her father. Not attached to the Elloway estate. Hers, because it rested in her hand and memory. That small courtesy unsettled her more than any declaration might have done. By afternoon, the rain had thinned to a mist over Mayfair, softening the edges of the houses and turning the iron railings black with damp. Lydmere House stood on a quieter street than Beatrice had expected, grand but not ostentatious, with pale stone steps, polished brass, and windows that seemed to observe the world without inviting its noise inside. The footman who admitted them did not stare at Beatrice's cheek. That was the first kindness of the house, though perhaps it was only discipline. The second came when the Duke himself met them, not in a crowded drawing room arranged for performance, but in a long library where the curtains had been drawn halfway against the grey light and a table near the hearth had been prepared with 3 chairs, a shaded lamp, a magnifying glass, and several small velvet-lined trays. Lady Helena. Lady Beatrice. He bowed to both, first to the aunt because propriety required it, then to Beatrice with a gravity that made the room feel less like a museum and more like a threshold. "Thank you for coming." Lady Helena looked around the library with open approval. Books, fire, and no unnecessary women with fans. "Your Grace has arranged a civilized afternoon. I hoped to avoid ambush," he said. London considers ambush a form of conversation. London considers many sins conversation. Lady Helena took the chair nearest the fire, not because she was frail, but because she enjoyed choosing the best position before anyone offered it. Beatrice remained standing a moment longer, her gloved fingers resting on the reticule that held her mother's miniature. The library smelled of leather, old paper, coal smoke, and something faintly resinous from polished wood. Along one wall, portraits of Harcourt ancestors watched in dark frames, but unlike the gallery at Mardale Court, this room did not seem to demand worship. It asked for attention. The Duke noticed her gaze. "My mother disliked portraits hung too high. She said ancestors ought to meet one's eye or be removed for arrogance." "She sounds formidable," Beatrice said. She was. Particularly when correct. Lady Helena gave a soft hum. "The best kind." Beatrice drew the miniature from her reticule and laid it on the table, still wrapped in the faded silk. Her hands looked composed. She was grateful for gloves, which hid the pressure of her fingertips. The Duke did not reach for it. "May I examine it?" he asked. Even after the gallery, even after the drawing room, the question caught her. "Permission?" Again. "Yes," she said. "Please." He unwrapped the silk carefully. Lady Mirabel's painted face emerged beneath the lamplight, smaller than memory and somehow more alive. The Duke angled the miniature not toward himself, but toward Beatrice and Lady Helena first, as if acknowledging that the object did not become his merely because he studied it. Only then did he lift the magnifying glass and inspect the rim, the brushwork, the tiny clasp, and the damaged reverse. "The hand is refined," he said. "Not fashionable work for mass commissions. Personal. Likely made for someone who expected to keep it close." Lady Helena leaned forward. Her usual irony left her face. "I remember that blue at Mirabel's throat." Beatrice turned quickly. "You remember it?" "Yes. She wore a ribbon like that when she was first presented. Your grandmother said blue made her look too serious. Mirabel wore it anyway." Lady Helena's eyes narrowed at the miniature. There was an inscription on the back. "I cannot recall the words, but I remember Mirabel laughing when she showed it to me. She said one day it would explain her better than any family prayer book." Beatrice felt something open inside her, not hope yet, but a room where hope might stand. "She never told me. You were very young when she died." The answer was gentle, and for that reason it hurt. The Duke turned the miniature over beneath the lamp. The scraped place looked uglier in this light, more deliberate, less like age. "This was not where," he said. Someone removed words. Lady Helena's mouth tightened. "Alistair." She did not ask it as a question. Beatrice looked at the damaged back until the scratches blurred. Her father's thumb had covered that place too quickly. Her father had called it defaced as if defacement were natural, like weather. "Can it be restored?" she asked. "Perhaps not fully," the Duke said. "But not all damage succeeds in erasing what it intended to destroy." He reached for one of the trays and placed beside the miniature 2 others of similar size. "These belonged to my mother. Both are veil pieces by the same artist. They bear inscriptions." He turned one over. The back read, in minute brown lettering, "For Adelaide, who sees spring before the rest of us thaw." The other read, "For Thomas Vale, in duty and affection." "Records of affection," Beatrice whispered, remembering his words at Mardale Court. "And obligation," the Duke said. "In families like ours, the two are often confused. Sometimes one is used to conceal the other." Lady Helena glanced at him sharply. "You suspect more than sentiment." I suspect your cousin's miniature may have served as an identifying token for papers now inconvenient to Lord Mardale. The room became very quiet. Beatrice should have felt shock, but instead she felt the odd steadiness that came when a secret finally aligned with old fear. My father told me nothing belongs to me. Men often announce their crimes as principals, Lady Helena said. Especially over breakfast. The Duke's mouth almost softened, but his eyes remained on Beatrice. I have written to a solicitor who handled Vale family matters before your mother's marriage. I will not proceed without your permission to inquire further. There it was again. Permission. Yet this time it came with danger. If there had been papers, if her father had hidden them, then every insult had a purpose beyond cruelty. She was not merely unwanted. She had been managed. Diminished. Kept too ashamed to ask what might be hers. If I give permission, Beatrice said slowly, my father will say I am ungrateful. Lady Helena gave a dry little laugh. He has said worse with less provocation. He will say I have been influenced. Then be influenced by truth, the Duke said. The words were quiet, but they struck something deep. Beatrice looked at him across the table. The lamplight did not flatter him as candlelight flattered most gentlemen. It made his face more severe, emphasizing the line between restraint and anger. She wondered how many women had mistaken that severity for coldness. She wondered whether she was mistaking attention for care. Cressida's whisper returned to her. Scholars love puzzles until they solve them. Then they put them in cabinets. Beatrice picked up the miniature before she could lose courage. Your Grace, may I ask something ungracious? I would rather have an ungracious truth than a graceful lie. Do you care what happened to me, or do you care because there is a mystery? Lady Helena's fan stilled. The question seemed to embarrass the air itself, but the Duke did not look away. For several seconds, he said nothing. Beatrice respected him for that, though the silence nearly broke her. Easy reassurance would have been another kind of insult. I care that a mystery exists because it appears to have wounded you, he said at last. But I do not mistake the wound for the person. I admire your mind. I am angered by your father's treatment. I am troubled by that object. And I am aware that none of those things gives me a right to your trust. Her fingers tightened around the miniature. Then what do you want? The chance to earn it without demanding that you pretend it has already been given. That answer went where compliments could not. Beatrice looked down quickly, but there was no hiding the effect of it. Her life had been full of men who believed obedience was proof of gratitude. Here sat one who seemed to understand that trust might require distance as much as closeness. I am afraid, she said, and hated that the words sounded so small. Not of you. Of wanting to believe you. His hand moved slightly on the table, then stopped several inches from hers. The restraint was more intimate than touch. Then do not believe me quickly. She looked up. Most gentlemen prefer speed in admiration. Most gentlemen have poor taste. Lady Helena coughed once, though Beatrice suspected it concealed amusement. The Duke continued, softer now. Lady Beatrice, you are not a puzzle to be solved. You are a person who has been denied answers. If I can help you find them, I will. If you decide I have gone too far, you need only say so. Beatrice stared at the scratched back of the miniature. For years, it had seemed proof of loss. Now it looked like evidence. That was a frightening transformation. Evidence could be pursued. Evidence could anger powerful men. Evidence could change the shape of a daughter's life. Write to the solicitor, she said. Ask what he knows. The Duke inclined his head. I will do so today. And the miniature? Do not surrender it to your father. His answer came at once. Not even if he claims family right. Not even if he says the matter is sentimental foolishness. Especially not then. Lady Helena reached across and covered Beatrice's wrist lightly with two gloved fingers. Your mother would have wanted you to keep it. Beatrice closed her eyes for one breath. In the dark behind her lids, she saw no grand revelation, no sudden restoration, only a young woman in a blue ribbon laughing over hidden words meant to survive her. When Beatrice opened her eyes, the Duke was watching her with the same grave attention he gave the paintings, but not as if she were an object under glass. As if she were the only living thing in the room that mattered. That was dangerous. That was almost enough. Outside, Mayfair continued its gossip, its carriages, its polished cruelties. Inside Lydmere House, the damaged miniature lay between them, and for the first time in Beatrice's life, the scratches on its back felt less like an ending than a message that had waited years for someone brave enough to read it. By the end of that week, Beatrice discovered that London did not need certainty in order to sharpen its knives. It only needed a room, a candlelit table, and enough respectable people willing to pretend cruelty was concern. Lady Winford's dinner party was said to be intimate, which in Mayfair meant 26 guests chosen with the precision of a firing line. The dining room glowed with amber light from 2 chandeliers, and every place setting seemed arranged to reflect another face, another glance, another judgment. Beatrice entered beside Lady Helena with the damaged miniature secured beneath the bodice of her gown in a small silk pocket her aunt had ordered sewn there that morning. Not visible. Not surrendered. Close enough to feel like a second heart. Across the room, the Duke of Lydmere stood near the mantel, speaking with an elderly marquis whose hearing trumpet gave him the appearance of receiving state secrets from the fire. Julian turned before Beatrice was announced. It was the smallest movement, yet it steadied her more than any greeting could have done. He did not smile for display. He simply saw her. Lady Helena noticed, of course. "There," she murmured. "Do not look so surprised. Men with libraries occasionally learn where to place their attention." Beatrice almost answered, but Lady Cressida appeared first, draped in pale green silk with seed pearls at her throat and an expression of such gentle sorrow that Beatrice knew at once the evening would not pass quietly. Cressida kissed the air near her sister's cheek. "Beatrice, you look very composed. I'm glad. After all the talk, I was afraid you might decide not to come." "Why would I stay away?" Beatrice asked. "Oh, I don't know. I only thought it must be hard to sit beneath so many eyes. I have had practice." Cressida's gaze flickered. "Yes. I suppose you have." Before Beatrice could answer, Lady Winford swept forward, smiling as though she had invented welcome and intended to charge for it. "Lady Beatrice, how brave of you to join us." "Lady Helena, always a pleasure. His Grace has been most particular in asking whether you had arrived." "How alarming," Lady Helena said. "A duke with manners. The season may not survive it." Lady Winford laughed because rank required her to, then led them toward the company. The first half-hour passed in the familiar theatre of polished wounds. Beatrice was asked whether she found the city tiring, whether she had ordered new gowns, whether she considered herself prepared for so public a destiny. Each question wore kid gloves. Each one pressed. Julian did not rescue her from every inquiry. That would have made her seem helpless. Instead, he placed himself where she could see him and answered only when silence would have permitted insult to pass as truth. When Mrs. Dalrymple remarked that sudden elevation could make a woman dizzy, Julian replied, "Then it is fortunate Lady Beatrice has spent her life observing from steady ground." When Lord Pennicott wondered whether Lydmere Park might prove too large a responsibility, Beatrice answered before the Duke could. "A large house is managed by attention, my lord, not by astonishment." Lady Helena hid a smile in her wineglass. The first course had been cleared when the paper appeared. It was not brought in dramatically. Nothing truly vicious ever needed drama. A folded society sheet slid from Lady Farnham's reticule and passed beneath the table to Mrs. Dalrymple, then to Lord Pennicott, then across to a young widow who covered her mouth too late. Small sounds travelled faster than words. A breath. A suppressed laugh. The whisper of paper against linen. Beatrice felt the change before she saw the page. Cressida sat 3 seats away, her eyes lowered to her soup spoon, looking pained in a way that drew sympathy toward herself. Lady Winford, presiding from the far end, pretended not to notice until noticing became unavoidable. "What amusement have you found, Lady Farnham?" she asked lightly. "Something too foolish to repeat, I am sure." Lady Farnham fluttered. "Only a paragraph. These little prints grow more impertinent by the day." "Then do not feed it," Lady Helena said. "Gossip, like damp, thrives where ladies pretend not to see it." Mrs. Dalrymple looked toward Beatrice with practiced reluctance. Perhaps it is best brought into the open. Secrets do more harm than truth. Beatrice's fork rested beside her plate. She did not reach for it. Julian's gaze sharpened from across the table. Truth rarely arrives folded under a dinner napkin, he said. Read it, Lady Winford said, smiling too brightly. If it is absurd, we shall laugh and be done. No one laughed. Lady Farnham unfolded the sheet, cleared her throat, and read in a voice sweetened by apology. The newest marvel of Mayfair concerns a certain learned duke whose charity appears to have exceeded taste. Society asks whether compassion now outranks beauty in the marriage market, and whether the future Duchess of L shall be remembered not as a bride, but as the pity bride. The room went silent. Not politely silent. Hungry silent. The words had entered the candlelight and sat there, ugly and pleased with themselves. Beatrice felt them strike where her father's words still lived, but this time something unexpected happened. The pain did not hollow her out. It clarified her. She looked first at Cressida, whose eyes were damp and wide. Too wide. Then at Lady Farnham's hand, still holding the paper. Then at Julian, whose jaw had gone hard enough to change his face. He moved as if to rise. Beatrice lifted one hand, barely an inch from the table. Stop. He stopped. The gesture passed through the room like a spark. Several people saw it. That mattered. Beatrice stood. Her chair made the softest sound against the carpet, and somehow that sound was more shocking than a cry would have been. Lady Farnham, she said, may I see the paragraph? Lady Farnham blinked. My dear, I don't think that would be wise. Nor was reading it aloud. Lady Helena's eyes flashed approval. After a strained moment, the paper was passed to Beatrice. She looked at the printed words. They were smaller than the damage they hoped to do. That almost comforted her. It is an interesting accusation, she said. Mrs. Dalrymple gave a little gasp. Accusation? Yes. It accuses His Grace of pity, me of desperation, and all of you of believing that a woman's worth becomes doubtful when it cannot be hung around her neck like diamonds. Someone inhaled. Beatrice folded the paper once, neatly. Her hands were steady now. Pity may open a door. It cannot teach a woman how to stand upright once inside. The silence changed. Beatrice heard it change. If His Grace had offered me only charity, I would have refused him. If I believed myself saved by his rank alone, I would be more foolish than any paragraph could claim. But I have spent years in rooms where people looked at me and decided they had understood everything. I assure you, it has given me excellent practice in recognizing shallow judgment. Lady Winford's face had gone very still. Lord Pennicott studied his plate as if it had become a legal document. Cressida's lips parted, but no sound came. Beatrice placed the folded paper beside her setting. You may call me plain. You may call me unexpected. You may call me unsuitable, if your imagination is tired. But do not call me pitiable because a man of rank chose to hear what others refused to hear. Julian stood then, not to take the speech from her, but because remaining seated would have been a failure of allegiance. Lady Beatrice has spoken with more dignity than the paragraph deserves, he said. I will add only this. Any house that finds such wit, courage, and restraint a subject for mockery need not expect my continued attendance. Lady Winford turned pale. A duke's absence could empty more rooms than a scandal sheet could fill. Lady Helena rose with great calm. How fortunate we had not yet reached dessert. I dislike custards served with cowardice. That should have ended it, but as Julian came around the table to escort Beatrice out, his gaze lowered to the folded paper. A torn corner showed where it had been sealed before circulation. A small smear of dark red wax clung to the edge. He lifted it with 2 fingers and paused. Beatrice saw the moment recognition entered his eyes. Your Grace, she asked softly. He looked toward the doorway, where Cressida stood with one hand against her throat and fear breaking through the polish of her face. Then he looked back at the wax. Mardale, he said under his breath. Not loudly enough for the room. Loudly enough for Beatrice. The humiliation had been planned. And someone in her father's house had placed the knife in London's hand. Julian did not tell Beatrice what he meant by Mardale until 3 days had passed, and in those 3 days silence became more damaging than scandal. At first, she thought his restraint was kindness. He escorted her and Lady Helena from Lady Winford's house without once asking whether she was wounded by the paragraph, as if he understood that some injuries became worse when handled in public. In the carriage, Lady Helena declared the dinner party a failure for everyone except Truth, which had at least been given a seat. Julian did not smile. He sat opposite Beatrice with the folded society sheet in his gloved hand, his thumb resting near the smear of red wax. When they reached Half Moon Street, he helped Lady Helena down first, then offered his hand to Beatrice. The contact lasted only a moment, proper and brief, yet she felt the restraint in it. He wished to say something. He chose not to. "Your Grace," she said softly on the pavement, while mist silvered the brim of his hat. "You recognized the seal." His eyes moved to hers. "I recognized enough to make care necessary." "Care for whom?" He paused. "For you." It was the sort of answer that should have comforted her. Instead, it closed a door. The next morning, a note arrived from Lydmere House. It was courteous, exact, and colder than his presence had been. His Grace begged Lady Beatrice's patience while certain matters were verified. Verified. Beatrice read the word until it blurred. Lady Helena took the letter, read it once, and tapped it against the breakfast table. Men adore verification when courage would be more efficient. He must have a reason. Of course he has a reason. The trouble with intelligent men is that they can provide reasons for nearly every foolish thing they do. Beatrice tried to laugh and failed. Outside, carriages passed beneath the windows, carrying ladies to calls, dressmakers, and the next room in which her name would be undressed. By noon, London's whisper had changed shape. It was no longer merely that the Duke had chosen her out of pity. Now it was that Lady Beatrice Elloway had known of an irregularity in her dowry and had concealed it until Lydmere's offer made her useful. By tea, the rumour had acquired detail. By evening, it had acquired certainty. "They say you trapped him with a secret claim," Lady Helena said, reading a note from a friend whose loyalty had arrived wrapped in alarm. "They say your father was forced to reveal the matter because his Grace began asking questions." Beatrice stood at the window with the miniature in her hand. The sky over Mayfair was the colour of pewter. "My father revealed nothing unless it served him." "True." Lady Helena's voice softened. "But the rumour serves someone." The following afternoon, Cressida called. She came without Lord Mardale, which made the visit more dangerous. Her gown was lavender, her eyes shadowed, and her gloves fitted with the delicacy of a woman trained to seem fragile when she carried a blade made of words. Lady Helena remained in the room, but Cressida still lowered her voice as if offering sisterly mercy. "Beatrice, I had to come. Papa is furious, and I think matters are worse than you know." "Then speak plainly." Cressida looked wounded by the request. "I'm trying to help." "That would be new." "You may find it easier if you begin with facts." Lady Helena made a small approving sound over her embroidery. Cressida's cheeks coloured. "His Grace has been corresponding with solicitors. Not only about Papa. About you." Beatrice's hand stilled on the arm of her chair. "About me? About your mother's money? About whether you knew anything? About whether there were papers hidden from him? Who told you that?" "Papa received a letter. I saw only a little." That was almost certainly a lie. Cressida rarely saw only a little of anything that could injure. "And you came to warn me?" Beatrice asked. "I came because I don't want you humiliated further." Cressida's eyes flicked to the left side of Beatrice's face, then away too late. "You think his Grace is different because he speaks beautifully. But men like him don't marry uncertainty. They examine it. His investigating you, Beatrice." The words entered quietly. That made them hard to defend against. Beatrice set the miniature on the table between them. "No. He is investigating what my father did." "Is that what he told you?" Cressida leaned forward. "Or is that what you hope? Scholars love the truth until it costs them comfort. Dukes love honour until scandal threatens the name carved over their door." Lady Helena's needle stopped. "Lady Cressida, if you have exhausted your concern, I suggest you preserve the remainder for your mirror." Cressida stood, wounded pride rushing to her rescue. You both think me cruel. Perhaps I am. But I know society better than Beatrice does. I know what happens when a woman becomes an embarrassment to an important man. She turned to Beatrice, and for 1 second the performance faltered. Something frightened and young looked out through the beauty. If he wanted to reassure you, he would have done it already. After she left, Beatrice did not move for a long time. Lady Helena did not insult her with immediate comfort. At last, her aunt said, "Do not let Cressida's fear borrow your voice." "What if it is not fear?" Beatrice asked. "What if it is warning?" "Then ask him." The chance came that evening. Julian called at a proper hour, with a note sent ahead and Lady Helena seated near the fire like a guardian carved from skepticism. He looked tired. Not disordered, never that, but there were shadows beneath his eyes and a severity about his mouth that had not been there in the library. Beatrice saw the strain and hated that her heart softened before her mind allowed it. "Lady Beatrice," he said, bowing. "Lady Helena." "Your Grace," Lady Helena said. "I trust your verification has been having a pleasant holiday at our expense." His gaze moved to Beatrice. He accepted the rebuke because he deserved it. That frightened her more than defensiveness would have done. After the required civilities, Lady Helena announced that she would remain by the fire and develop sudden deafness only if honesty proved worth rewarding. Julian looked as though he nearly smiled, then did not. Beatrice stood beside the small table where her mother's miniature lay wrapped again in silk. "Are you investigating me?" The question came out steadier than she felt. Julian's eyes sharpened with pain. "No, that was quick. Because it is true. Are you investigating my mother's trust?" "Yes." "My father's accounts?" "Yes." "My dowry?" A pause. Too small for most people. Large enough for her. "Yes," he said. "Because the matters appear connected." Beatrice nodded once. "And you did not think I should know?" "I thought incomplete knowledge would cause you needless distress." "Needless?" He drew a breath. That was poorly said. It was honestly said. She looked at the silk bundle because looking at him had become difficult. "You believed you could carry the truth until it was safe enough to hand to me. I believed I could spare you another accusation without proof to defeat it. And in doing so, you left me to hear the accusation from everyone else." He had no answer ready. That was almost worse than an excuse. The fire shifted in the grate. Lady Helena did not move. Beatrice felt the old house at Mardale inside her again, every locked drawer, every withheld explanation, every command dressed as protection. "My father spent years deciding what I was permitted to know," she said. "He called it prudence. He called it family dignity. He called it my own good when he had exhausted better words. I cannot walk from his management into yours simply because yours is gentler." Julian's face changed. "That was never my intention." Intentions do not undo the shape of the act. The sentence cost her more than she expected. His hand moved once, then stilled at his side. The restraint she had once admired now felt like another locked door. "Tell me what you have learned," she said. He looked toward Lady Helena, then back. "Not enough. That is not an answer. It is the only responsible one I can give tonight." "Responsible to whom?" He flinched then. Not visibly to anyone untrained in pain, but Beatrice saw it. "To you," he said. No, her voice broke on the small word, then steadied with a force that surprised them both. "To your own need to control the moment of revelation." Silence. Julian looked at her as if she had placed a mirror before him and he disliked the accuracy. Beatrice picked up the miniature. The silk was soft, the hidden scratches hard beneath it. "I can survive being unloved," she said. "I will not survive being managed." Lady Helena closed her eyes briefly, as if the words had struck a bell she had been waiting years to hear. Julian bowed his head. "You are right." Beatrice had expected denial. The admission hurt differently. "Then why does it still feel as though I am outside the room where my own life is being discussed?" "Because I have left you there." He raised his eyes. "I am sorry." For one dangerous moment, apology nearly weakened her. But apology was not yet repair. "I need more than regret, Your Grace." "You shall have it." Not shall. Not when you decide. I am going tomorrow to the solicitor who served my mother's family, and I will ask my own questions. He went very still. That may provoke your father. Everything I do provokes him eventually. Let me arrange protection. No, the word was quiet, but it ended the matter. Lady Helena will accompany me. I am not asking permission. Something like pride passed through his expression, sorrowing and bright. No, he said. You are not. Beatrice held his gaze, and whatever fragile warmth had been growing between them did not die, but it changed. It became something sterner. Something that would require truth to survive. Until I know what belongs to me, she said, and until I know whether you can trust me with the pain of my own life, your offer must remain unanswered. Julian accepted the blow without looking away. Then I will wait. Beatrice wanted to believe him. Instead, she closed her fingers around the miniature and let silence answer for her. Morning came with a hard white sky and the sound of carriage wheels already moving through Mayfair before Beatrice had finished fastening her gloves. She had slept little, though she had remained in bed the required number of hours so Lady Helena would not look at her with that grave compassion older women reserved for younger ones who were attempting courage before breakfast. The damaged miniature lay in her reticule, wrapped in its faded silk, and beneath it rested a folded note addressed to the Duke of Lydmere. She had written it 3 times. The first version had been too wounded. The second had been too proud. The third said only what truth required. Until I know what my mother left and what has been hidden from me, I cannot answer any offer of marriage. I do not withdraw from respect. I withdraw from uncertainty. Lady Helena read it once, returned it without comment, and ordered the carriage. You are very quiet, she said now as they rolled past wet pavements and iron railings blackened by rain. I am afraid if I speak, I shall sound braver than I am. That is not the worst crime. Many people sound kinder than they are and are invited everywhere. Beatrice looked out at London, at the flower girls with baskets tucked beneath awnings, at the footmen carrying notes from house to house, at the closed doors behind which her name had already been rearranged for amusement. Do you think I am doing this from pride? Lady Helena's answer came without softness. I think pride is what people call self-respect when it inconveniences them. The solicitor's office stood near Lincoln's Inn, in a narrow street where the houses leaned toward one another as if exchanging old secrets above the heads of clients. The brass plate beside the door read Mr. Septimus Grain, solicitor. The name meant nothing to Beatrice, and yet her mother had once trusted this establishment enough to leave papers in its care. That knowledge struck harder than she expected. Her mother had lived a life before Mardale Court. She had signed letters, made decisions, perhaps even planned protections for a daughter too young to understand she would someday need them. Mr. Grain received them in a room lined with deed boxes and shelves of folded parchment tied in pink tape. He was a thin gentleman with cautious eyes and a manner so dry that every word seemed to have been pressed flat between legal documents. At first, he bowed correctly and spoke as though this were an inconvenient mistake. Lady Beatrice, Lady Helena. I fear any matter concerning the late Lady Mardale Elloway may be complicated by the passage of years. Records are not always as complete as families hope. Families often hope for convenient incompletion, Lady Helena replied. Mr. Grain blinked. Indeed. Beatrice sat with her hands folded. Sir, I have not come to ask what my father permits me to know. I have come to ask what my mother arranged before her death. The solicitor's expression changed, not much, but enough. Has Lord Mardale authorized this inquiry? No, then you understand my position may be delicate. Beatrice opened her reticule and placed the silk-wrapped miniature on his desk. I understand delicate positions. I have been placed in one for most of my life. Mr. Grain looked at the little bundle as though it had spoken in a dead woman's voice. Where did you obtain that? It was given to me by my mother. You are certain? I remember her hand closing mine around it. I remember her telling me to keep it where unkind eyes could not make it less mine. Lady Helena went very still. Mr. Grain reached for the miniature, then stopped. May I? You may look. I will hold it. Beatrice unwrapped it and turned the painted face toward him. His breath left him quietly. Then she turned the damaged back. He leaned closer, his caution giving way to recognition. There was an inscription. "So I have been told." And a letter. The room seemed to tighten around those 3 words. Beatrice heard Lady Helena inhale. "A letter from my mother?" "A letter of instruction," Mr. Grain said, then seemed to regret speaking so plainly. The miniature was described as an identifying object. It was to be presented when Lady Beatrice Elloway reached her majority or upon the occasion of her marriage negotiations, whichever came first. Beatrice's fingers closed over the silk. Marriage negotiations have begun. So London suggests. Lady Helena's eyes narrowed. London suggests many things after luncheon. This is not one of them. Mr. Grain lowered his gaze to the desk. "There was a trust, my lady. Established from funds settled upon Lady Mirabel Vale before her marriage. Not enormous by ducal standards, but independent. It was intended for you." Beatrice did not move. She had imagined shock as something loud, but this was silent. It entered her like cold water. "Intended?" "Yes." "What became of it?" The solicitor drew a breath. "That is where the matter becomes difficult." "Difficult for whom?" Lady Helena asked. "For Lord Mardale?" "For all parties." "I am one of the parties," Beatrice said. "Tell me." Mr. Grain rose, crossed to a shelf, and drew down a deed box marked Vale, Mirabel, Settlement. His fingers hesitated over the lock. Some records were transferred after Lady Mirabel's death to Lord Mardale's appointed solicitor. Certain annual acknowledgements should have been returned here. Several are missing. There are notations of sums advanced against expected income. "Advanced to whom?" Beatrice asked. He did not answer quickly enough. "To Lord Mardale, as guardian and father." Lady Helena's hand came down on the head of her cane. "Guardian." A word men adore when they are spending money that belongs to someone else. "The accounts must be reviewed before any accusation is made." "I am not asking you to accuse him," Beatrice said. "I am asking whether my father knew this trust existed." Mr. Grain looked at the miniature. He signed correspondence concerning it. That was the blow. Not the money. Not even the theft, if theft it proved to be. The blow was that her father had known. He had known there was something her mother had left her, something that said she had been considered, remembered, provided for. He had watched Beatrice live like an unwelcome dependent in her own family while hiding proof that she had not been entirely powerless. The room blurred, then cleared. Beatrice sat straighter. "Is the letter here?" Mr. Grain's caution returned. It was once copied in the register, but the original was to remain with the miniature. If it is not with the object, then it may have been removed. "By my father." "I cannot state that." "No," Beatrice said. "But I can hear what you cannot state." A faint sound came from the hallway. A clerk appeared at the door, visibly uncomfortable. "Mr. Grain, a messenger from Lord Mardale has just delivered this." He held out a sealed note. Even from across the room, Beatrice recognized the dark red wax. Mr. Grain took it, broke the seal, and read. His face tightened. "Lord Mardale requests that no papers concerning family settlements be released without his direct instruction." Lady Helena smiled without warmth. How prompt guilt can be when properly alarmed. Beatrice rose. "Then you will release nothing today. But you will preserve everything." Mr. Grain bowed. "That I can do. And you will write a list of what should exist, what is missing, and what was transferred." "That may be possible." "Make it certain." Her voice surprised her. It surprised him too. She was not loud. She was simply finished being managed. "I am Lady Beatrice Elloway. If my mother made provision for me, I have the right to know its shape, even if men have spent years filing it under inconvenience." Mr. Grain looked at Lady Helena, then back at Beatrice. Whatever he saw there altered him. "You shall have the list by tomorrow afternoon." Outside, the carriage had not yet been called when Beatrice sealed her note to Julian and handed it to a footman with instructions for Lydmere House. Lady Helena stood beside her beneath the narrow awning while rain stitched the street in silver threads. "Do you regret sending it?" her aunt asked. Beatrice watched the messenger vanish into the traffic. "Yes." "Good." Choices without pain are often merely preferences. I do not want to wound him. Then do not confuse wounding a man with refusing to disappear for him. Beatrice touched the reticule where the miniature rested. The scratches on its back no longer felt like proof of ugliness or neglect. They felt like a locked door with the grain beginning to split. He may think I have rejected him. He is a clever man. Let him suffer the discipline of understanding. At Lydmere House, Julian received the note less than an hour later, just as his own solicitor laid a ledger before him and pointed to a column of payments marked under Lord Mardale's hand. Julian read Beatrice's words once. Then again. He folded the paper with more care than calm. Across the desk, the solicitor cleared his throat. Your Grace, these withdrawals appear to have been made from funds designated for Lady Beatrice. Julian looked toward the rain-dark window, and the silence that followed was not hesitation. It was reckoning. Then I have left her alone with the truth I should have trusted her to bear, he said. Find every missing paper. The solicitor bowed. Julian placed Beatrice's note beside the ledger. For the first time since entering her life, he had not arrived in time to protect her from pain. Worse, he had helped create the shape of it. And somewhere across London, Beatrice Elloway was no longer waiting to be chosen. She had chosen herself. Lord Mardale did not summon Beatrice home. He invited her. That was how she knew he meant to make a stage of her obedience. The note arrived at Half Moon Street just after luncheon, written in his own hand and folded with the stiff precision he used when rage had cooled into strategy. He requested Lady Beatrice Elloway's presence at the Mardale House drawing room that evening for the purpose of settling recent misunderstandings before several trusted friends of the family. Trusted friends, in Lord Mardale's vocabulary, meant witnesses chosen to agree before hearing. Lady Helena read the note, held it over the tea table for one silent second, and said, "He has dressed a trap in evening gloves." Beatrice already knew. Still, she dressed carefully. Not splendidly. Splendor would seem like defiance seeking applause. Not plainly enough to seem defeated. She wore a gown of deep blue silk that had belonged to her mother and had been altered by Lady Helena's maid with brisk competence and no sentiment. The color did not hide the pale mark along her cheek. It made hiding unnecessary. The damaged miniature rested in the silk pocket near her heart. When she and Lady Helena entered the Mardale House drawing room at 8, Beatrice understood at once that the word trusted had been selected with malice. Lady Winford sat near the fire, holding a fan closed between both hands. Lord Pennicott stood by the mantel with a face composed for judgment. Mrs. Dalrymple occupied the sofa as though she had been born to witness other women's discomfort. Cressida sat beside their father in white, her eyes already bright with prepared distress. Lord Mardale rose. "Beatrice," he said, with paternal sorrow so polished it nearly shone. "I am pleased you came. You requested it, Papa. I requested the opportunity to spare you further embarrassment." Lady Helena's cane touched the carpet once. How generous. I always admire a man who creates the weather and then offers an umbrella. Lord Mardale ignored her. He had never liked women who reached the age when fear of male displeasure became optional. "My friends are here because this matter has gone beyond family walls. Rumor has injured us all. It is best that truth be restored in a dignified setting." Beatrice looked at the room. Truth is welcome wherever it can survive. Mrs. Dalrymple gave a small gasp, as if composure itself had been insulted. Lord Mardale's jaw tightened, but he smiled. "You see, this is precisely what concerns me. My eldest daughter has lately mistaken defiance for dignity. She has been influenced by persons who do not understand the history of this family." "Do name them," Lady Helena said. "I enjoy discovering when I am powerful." Cressida leaned forward, her voice trembling. "Aunt Helena, please. Papa is only trying to prevent scandal from destroying Beatrice. We all know she has been under great strain." Beatrice looked at her sister. "Have I? Of course you have. Anyone would be." His Grace's attention, the gossip, the questions about money. It must be overwhelming. Especially when assisted by family. Cressida's eyes filled with tears. The performance was so delicate that Beatrice almost admired the craftsmanship. Lord Mardale turned to the guests. You see how bitterness has warped her. A question was raised concerning an old provision from her mother's side. A minor matter. Nothing that justifies public accusation or the involvement of a duke's solicitors. Yet Lady Beatrice has allowed herself to imagine wrongs where there are only ordinary family arrangements. Ordinary arrangements do not require secrecy, Beatrice said. Nor do they require the destruction of inscriptions. A stillness moved through the room. Lord Mardale's gaze dropped, just once, to the front of her gown. Too quick. Not quick enough. That object, he said, is precisely why this conversation is necessary. The miniature you carry belongs to the Elloway family. It should be returned before it is used to inflame further confusion. Beatrice's hand rose to the silk pocket. She did not draw the miniature out. It was given to me by my mother. You were a child. Yes. Children can receive gifts. Lord Pennicott cleared his throat, eager to make cowardice sound like wisdom. Lady Beatrice, surely no one means to deprive you of a keepsake. But if the object concerns family papers, perhaps Lord Mardale is best placed to preserve it. Lady Helena looked at him. A man accused of hiding a door is rarely the best person to keep the key. Lord Mardale's face darkened. No accusation has been proved. No accusation has been answered, Beatrice said. For the first time, her father's grief costume slipped. You will not speak to me as though I stand on trial in my own house. Then do not gather a jury. The words left her before caution could restrain them. The room inhaled. Beatrice felt the old fear rise, but it no longer knew where to stand. Something in her had changed in Mr. Graine's office. A woman who had seen the outline of what was stolen could not return to being grateful for ignorance. Lord Mardale stepped closer. You will apologize. For what? For damaging your sister's prospects, for permitting His Grace to question my accounts, for spreading the fantasy that your mother left you some grand fortune, and for behaving like a woman whose vanity has outrun her station. Cressida pressed a handkerchief to her mouth. Beatrice, please. Just say you were mistaken. It doesn't have to be worse than this. Beatrice turned to her. Did you know about the society paragraph before it was read at Lady Winford's table? Cressida went pale. Lady Winford's fan opened, then stopped. I don't know what you mean, Cressida whispered. That is not an answer. Lord Mardale cut in. Enough. You are not here to interrogate your sister. You are here to submit to the plain fact that you have been indulged beyond your judgment. The Duke's interest has made you reckless. I will not allow this family to be dragged through scandal because you found, at last, a gentleman too honorable to recognize pity in himself. The wound should have opened. Instead, Beatrice felt strangely calm. If His Grace offered pity, I would not marry him. If he offered rescue without trust, I would not marry him. If he offered rank in exchange for silence, I would refuse that as well. Lord Mardale laughed softly. You overestimate your options. Perhaps. But I no longer underestimate my right to choose among them. His eyes hardened. Then hear your options clearly. If you persist, you will receive no further protection from this family. I will not receive you at Mardale Court. I will not have your name spoken in my household except as a warning. I will inform society that grief, envy, and disappointment have unsettled your judgment. Let His Grace decide whether he wants a wife cut off by her own father. Lady Helena started to rise, but Beatrice touched her arm. She had to answer this herself. You once told me nothing belonged to me, Beatrice said. Not my mother's name. Not my future. Not even a man's respect if it embarrassed you. I believed you longer than I should have. Lord Mardale held out his hand. The miniature. No, the room seemed to stop breathing. No. No, Papa. Beatrice's voice remained low. That made it stronger. I would rather be unprotected than protected by a lie. The fan slipped from Lady Winford's fingers and struck the carpet with a soft, absurd sound. Lord Mardale stared at Beatrice as if she had become a stranger in his own house. Perhaps she had. Perhaps that was freedom's first shape. He spoke with dangerous quiet. Then you leave me no choice. You have had choices all along. A knock sounded at the drawing-room door. Lord Mardale turned sharply. I said we were not to be disturbed. The door opened anyway. Mr. Bell, who had served Mardale House long enough to understand rank as a form of weather, stepped in with a face carefully emptied of opinion. His Grace, the Duke of Lydmere. Mr. Septimus Grain. Her Grace, the Dowager Duchess of Lydmere. Beatrice's heart struck once, hard. Julian entered first, dark and composed, but his eyes went immediately to her as if the rest of the room had to wait its turn. Behind him came Mr. Grain with a leather case under one arm. Last came the Dowager Duchess, small, silver-haired, and upright, with the expression of a woman who had not crossed London to enjoy ambiguity. Lord Mardale's face lost colour beneath its anger. Julian bowed with faultless courtesy. My lord, I apologize for arriving uninvited. His gaze moved to the witnesses, then returned colder. But I understand you have gathered an audience for truth. The Dowager Duchess removed her gloves finger by finger. How efficient of you, Lord Mardale, she said. It saves us the trouble of finding one. The arrival of the Dowager Duchess of Lydmere altered the drawing room more completely than shouting could have done. She was not tall, and age had thinned her figure, yet every person present seemed to sit straighter as she entered. Her gown of dark plum silk made no concession to fashion beyond what dignity allowed, and the emerald brooch at her throat looked less like ornament than a seal of office. She inclined her head to Lord Mardale with perfect courtesy, which somehow made the insult beneath it more severe. Julian remained near the door only long enough for Mr. Grain to step forward, then crossed the room to Beatrice. He did not take her hand. He did not perform rescue for the witnesses. He stopped at a proper distance and bowed, not as a duke to a distressed woman, but as a man acknowledging someone he had wronged. Lady Beatrice, he said, and the quietness of her name steadied her more than apology might have done. Before anything else is said, I owe you words that should have been spoken sooner. Lord Mardale made a sound of impatience. Your Grace, this is neither the hour nor the place for sentimental display. The Dowager Duchess turned one cool glance upon him. My lord, you selected the hour, the place, and the audience. You must not complain because better-mannered people brought the truth. A few eyes dropped. Lady Winford looked as though she wished her fan had not fallen beyond reach. Julian kept his attention on Beatrice. I thought that if I gathered proof before speaking, I would spare you uncertainty. In truth, I placed you outside the room where your own life was being examined. That was arrogance dressed as protection. Beatrice felt the words enter the part of her that had been braced against him. She did not forgive him at once. The fact that he did not ask her to made forgiveness more possible. You should have trusted me with pain, she said. Yes, he answered. I should have trusted you with truth. The silence afterward was not empty. It held the shape of a bridge not yet crossed. Lady Helena, seated beside Beatrice, gave one small nod, as if a debt had been named properly on a ledger. Lord Mardale stepped forward. This is absurd theatre. Beatrice has been overwrought, and His Grace, through excessive gallantry, has allowed a private family confusion to become a spectacle. A spectacle? Mr. Grain opened his leather case with hands that trembled only slightly. My lord, I was invited to speak only to records, not motives. The records are sufficient. You were not invited by me. No, the solicitor said. But Lady Beatrice requested a list of what ought to exist, what does exist, and what has gone missing. His Grace's solicitor requested the same by lawful inquiry through documents connected to the Vale family settlement. I have brought copies, and the originals remain secured. That last word struck Lord Mardale. Secured. His face tightened before he could hide it. The Dowager Duchess took a chair without waiting to be offered one. Proceed, Mr. Grain. I have discovered that when men say a matter is too delicate for ladies, it is usually because they have made it ugly. Mr. Grain removed several folded documents and laid them on a small table that a footman hastily brought forward. Beatrice watched the pink tape, the faded ink, the hard little rituals by which society made truth respectable enough to be heard. Lady Mirabel Vale, Mr. Grain began, later Lady Mardale Elloway, brought into marriage a settled portion from the Vale family. Part of that portion was placed in trust for any eldest daughter born of the marriage, to be transferred to that daughter upon her majority or upon formal marriage negotiations. Lady Beatrice Elloway is that daughter. Cressida's fingers tightened around her handkerchief. Mrs. Dalrymple stared at Beatrice as if wealth, even modest wealth, had made her face rearrange itself. Lord Mardale laughed once. A small provision. Hardly the grand romance my daughter imagines. It was not grand, Mr. Grain said. It was independent. The word landed softly and struck hard. Independent. Beatrice had never owned that word without apology. There were annual acknowledgements required, Mr. Grain continued. Several are missing from the records. However, copies kept in the Vale Register show repeated advances drawn against the income by Lord Mardale as guardian. Lord Pennicott shifted near the mantel. Lady Winford closed her eyes briefly, perhaps in discomfort, perhaps in calculation. Lord Mardale's voice became very calm. Family necessity. All properly within paternal discretion. Lady Helena leaned forward. Paternal discretion seems to have expensive tastes. Mr. Grain did not smile. There is more. The trust documents identify a miniature portrait of Lady Mirabel as a token to be preserved with a letter of instruction. The reverse of the miniature was recorded as bearing an inscription in Lady Mirabel's own chosen wording. Beatrice's hand moved to the silk pocket near her heart. Her father saw it and spoke sharply. That trinket has no bearing on accounts. Julian's eyes narrowed. You have been eager to possess it for something irrelevant. Lord Mardale looked away. Too late. The Dowager Duchess extended her hand, palm upward, not to Beatrice but toward the table. Lady Beatrice, only if you choose. Beatrice drew out the miniature. The room seemed to draw breath with it. She crossed to the table herself and laid it down, still wrapped in the silk her mother had once touched. No one else took it from her hand. Mr. Grain bent near, then stopped. The damage is significant. Damage is not always victory, Julian said. He took a candle from the mantel and placed it low beside the miniature, angling the light across the scraped backing. No apparatus, no spectacle. Only flame, shadow, and patience. The rough surface caught the glow in uneven ridges. Mr. Grain sprinkled the faintest breath of dark powder from a folded paper onto the backing, then brushed most of it away with a clean silk corner. Lady Winford gave a nervous sound. Is that wise? The Dowager Duchess did not look at her. At present, Lady Winford, wisdom is among the few things in this room not overrepresented. Slowly, beneath the angled light, fragments emerged. Not whole. Not clean. But enough. A curve of an F. The faint rise of an M. A longer stroke where a name had resisted erasure. Beatrice stood motionless as Mr. Grain read, first uncertainly, then with growing conviction. For my Beatrice, loved before she was seen. The words did not fill the room. They emptied it. Beatrice heard nothing for a moment, not the fire, not Cressida's faint breath, not London outside the windows. Her mother had not left her only a face in paint. She had left an answer. Before judgment. Before society. Before her father's voice had taught the house what to call her. Loved before she was seen. Beatrice pressed one hand to the edge of the table, not because she would fall, but because the floor seemed suddenly too small for what had been restored to her. Lady Helena's eyes shone openly now, and she made no attempt to hide it. Julian remained still beside Beatrice, close enough to support, far enough not to claim the moment. That restraint spoke more tenderly than any touch could have done. Lord Mardale broke the silence with a harsh breath. Sentimental nonsense. Mirabel was ill when she wrote such things. She was not thinking clearly. Beatrice turned to him. You knew the words. His face changed. Only a fraction. Enough. The Dowager Duchess's gaze sharpened. Mr. Grain looked up. Julian did not move at all. Lord Mardale realized his mistake and tried to recover. I knew my wife's habits. She was always dramatic about the child. The child, Lady Helena repeated, her voice low. You mean your daughter? Cressida whispered, Papa. It was the first honest word she had spoken all evening. Lord Mardale ignored her. None of this proves wrongdoing. A husband may manage his household. A father may correct vanity. A family may choose not to indulge every fanciful instruction left by a dying woman. Julian's expression hardened. Take care. No, Your Grace. You take care. You have been drawn in by wounded pride and a pretty tragedy. Beatrice was always too eager to be pitied. Beatrice lifted the miniature before anyone else could answer. The scraped backing faced her father. The damaged words faced him too. For years, she had imagined that if truth ever came, it would arrive with thunder. Instead, it came in her own voice, clear and quiet. How long did you know she loved me? Lord Mardale looked at the miniature as if the small painted thing had betrayed him more completely than any living witness could have done. For a moment, no one in the drawing-room moved. Lady Winford held herself so still that even the fallen fan at her feet seemed loud. Mrs. Dalrymple's lips parted, but no useful cruelty emerged. Cressida's handkerchief trembled in her lap. Julian stood beside the table with the candlelight catching the severe line of his face, and the Dowager Duchess watched Lord Mardale with the cold patience of a judge who had already heard enough. Beatrice waited. She had spent years waiting for answers that never came, years being told that silence was obedience, gratitude, dignity, good breeding. Now silence belonged to him, and it did not flatter. How long? She asked again. Lord Mardale's mouth worked once before words came. Your mother was sentimental. Illness made her extravagant. That is not an answer. She loved you, he snapped, and the room seemed to recoil from the plainness of it. Is that what you require? Yes. She loved you. She loved you with a foolishness that made no provision for reality. She thought tenderness could protect a child from the world. Beatrice felt the miniature in her hand, it scraped back rough beneath her thumb. No. She thought truth might. Mr. Grain opened another folded paper. My lord, there are entries here showing advances from the trust income in 3 consecutive years. Each was signed under your authority as guardian. The first was taken when Lady Beatrice was 7. The last when she was 19. Lord Pennicott shifted away from the mantel as if distance could free him from having listened. Surely family debts can be complex, he murmured. The Dowager Duchess turned her head. A man who steals from a daughter is not made complex by having debts. Lord Mardale's face darkened. I will not be called a thief in my own house. Then produce another word, Lady Helena said. One that means taking what was settled for her, concealing the record, and calling her burdensome while you spent it. Cressida looked at her father. Papa, is it true? He did not answer her. That was answer enough. Mr. Grain laid a second document beside the ledger. There is also correspondence from Lord Mardale's solicitor instructing that no papers concerning Lady Beatrice's maternal settlement be produced in response to inquiries from Lydmere House. The instruction is dated 3 days after His Grace made his formal offer. Julian's gaze did not leave Lord Mardale. You knew why I asked questions. I knew you were meddling in matters that did not concern you. Lady Beatrice concerns me because she is a person, not a liability to be hidden beneath account books. Lord Mardale laughed once. It was a broken sound pretending to be contempt. Noble words. But let us not be children. You wanted a cause. You wanted some injured creature to polish your honor upon. She was convenient. Beatrice felt Julian's anger before she saw it, but he did not answer first. He looked at her. The choice was hers. That, more than any defense, steadied her. No, Beatrice said. Convenient would have been silence. I was trained for that. I was very good at it. She turned to the witnesses. You were invited here tonight to see me corrected. You were meant to hear that I was vain, unstable, ungrateful, and eager to trap a duke. You have now heard that my father knew my mother loved me, knew she left provision for me, and chose to hide both until my ignorance became useful to him. Mrs. Dalrymple lowered her eyes. Lady Winford's face had lost its powdered certainty. Lord Mardale's voice cut in. Enough. No, Beatrice said. The word was quiet, but every person heard it. You have had years of enough. This is mine. Mr. Grain drew a fresh sheet from his case. My lord, the simplest course is acknowledgement. The trust must be restored to Lady Beatrice's control, subject to review of losses. If you contest it, the records will require broader examination. The phrase was polite. Its meaning was not. Broader examination meant clubs, creditors, solicitors, and drawing rooms. It meant the collapse of the dignity Lord Mardale had worshipped more faithfully than any living soul. The Dowager Duchess folded her hands. House Harcourt will not lend its name to concealment. If this matter is not set right tonight, it will be set right publicly by morning. Lord Mardale stared at her. You would ruin an earl over a woman's keepsake? No, she said. Over a man's conduct. Cressida rose suddenly. I didn't know about the money. Her voice shook, but this time the tears were not arranged for effect. I knew Papa wanted the miniature. I knew he was angry that His Grace chose Beatrice. I knew about the paragraph only after it was sent. I didn't stop it. Beatrice looked at her sister. The old habit would have been to soften first, to spare Cressida the discomfort of her own admission. She did not do it. You helped carry words you knew would wound me. I'm sorry, Cressida whispered. I was afraid. So was I. That answer struck harder than accusation. Cressida sat down as if her bones had lost their training. Lord Mardale looked around the room and found no ally strong enough to stand. Lady Winford would not meet his eyes. Lord Pennicott had discovered urgent interest in the pattern of the carpet. Mrs. Dalrymple pressed her lips together, already calculating how she would tell the story in a version that made her appear reluctant but righteous. At last, Lord Mardale took the pen Mr. Grain offered. His hand did not shake. Pride survived even shame. He signed the acknowledgement with a slashing motion, then pushed the paper away as though the ink offended him. There, he said. Are you satisfied? Beatrice looked at the signature. It did not undo childhood. It did not restore every dinner where she had been made to feel like an expense, every mirror she had avoided, every kindness from her mother that had been scraped nearly away. But it opened a locked door. That was not everything. It was enough for tonight. No, she said. But I am free to become so. Lord Mardale's face twisted. Do not imagine society will embrace you because a duke has indulged this performance. Julian stepped forward then. Society will follow what rank and truth make unavoidable. Your name will not command this narrative after tonight. Beatrice turned to him. Nor will yours. His expression changed, not with offense, but with understanding. No, the room seemed to narrow until the witnesses faded into candlelight and shadow. Julian faced her fully. When I first asked leave to offer for you, I did so because I had seen an injustice and could not leave it standing. I do not apologize for that. But I understand now that standing between you and cruelty is not the same as standing beside you in truth. He paused, and the restraint in him softened into something more vulnerable than any declaration he had yet made. Your mother's words are yours. The trust is yours. Your name is yours. None of it requires my title to be valid. Beatrice could feel every gaze upon them, but this time the attention did not strip her. It witnessed. Then why ask again, she said. Julian's answer came without haste. Because I do not want a grateful wife. I do not want a rescued one. I want the woman who corrected my catalogue, challenged my arrogance, defended herself when London expected tears, and chose truth even when it cost her comfort. I want the honor of walking beside you, if you decide I have earned that place. Beatrice's breath trembled. She looked once at Lady Helena, whose eyes were wet and proud. She looked at the Dowager Duchess, who inclined her head as if to say that no Harcourt woman would be rushed. Then Beatrice looked at the miniature. Loved before she was seen. She had been loved before a duke entered the gallery. She had been worthy before a solicitor opened a ledger. She had been herself before society decided whether to approve. That knowledge did not make Julian unnecessary. It made choosing him possible. I will not become Duchess of Lydmere to prove my value, she said. Then don't, Julian answered softly. Become my wife only if you believe I can honor it. You hurt me when you kept the truth from me. I know. If we marry, you will not protect me by closing doors. No. I'll open them, even when I fear what waits inside. There was no applause. No music. No breathless social delight. Only the quiet of a room forced to respect what it had not been invited to admire. Beatrice extended her hand. Julian took it carefully, as if the gift were not possession but trust renewed. "Then yes," she said. "Not because you saved me. Because you learned how not to." Julian bowed over her hand, and when he straightened, the emotion in his face was no longer cold, scholarly, or controlled enough to hide. Lord Mardale turned away first. That was his final defeat. Beatrice gathered the signed acknowledgement, the miniature, and her mother's restored words. Then she left Mardale House beside Julian and Lady Helena, with the Dowager Duchess following like a standard carried after battle. Outside, the London air was cold enough to sting, but Beatrice did not draw back from it. For the first time, the night did not feel like exile. It felt like a threshold. By late spring, Lydmere Park had learned Beatrice's name without whispering it. The estate lay in Hampshire beneath a soft May sky, its long lawns falling toward a silver lake, its beaches newly green, its stone terraces warmed by afternoon light. Yet what moved Beatrice most was not the size of the house or the number of servants who curtsied as she passed. It was the absence of flinching. No one hurried a portrait from the wall before she entered. No one lowered a voice when she crossed a threshold. No one looked at the pale mark on her cheek and then pretended the looking had not happened. On her first morning there, the housekeeper, Mrs. Arlen, presented the household books without apology and asked whether Her Grace would prefer the linen accounts before or after chapel repairs. Beatrice, still startled by the title that would become legally hers after the wedding, had answered that chapel repairs could wait until after breakfast but leaking roofs could not. Mrs. Arlen had smiled as though practical judgment were exactly what she had hoped to find. That small smile did what praise could not. It made a place for her. The wedding itself had been quiet by London standards, which meant only half the county had pretended not to be curious. Lord Mardale did not attend. Ill health was given as the formal reason, though everyone with access to a newspaper and a drawing-room knew that his disgrace had made absence his last remaining dignity. His debts had not vanished, but his authority had shrunk. The trust had been restored to Beatrice's control under Mr. Graine's careful supervision, with further repayment arranged in terms that stung Lord Mardale more deeply than any public insult. He had lost the power to define her. That was the only punishment she had needed to see. Cressida had attended the ceremony in a pale grey gown, not white, not blue, not anything that asked to be noticed. She had stood beside Lady Helena with lowered eyes and had wept only once, when Beatrice passed her after signing the register. "I don't deserve your kindness," Cressida had whispered. Beatrice had looked at the sister who had once been a rival because their father had taught her no safer role. "No," she had answered gently. "But you may learn to deserve your own." It was not forgiveness, not yet. It was a door left unlatched. Now, 3 months later, a letter from Cressida lay on Beatrice's writing table at Lydmere Park, awkward, careful, and more honest than anything her sister had ever written. She had moved to stay with Lady Helena in Bath for a time. She was learning, she said, how exhausting it was to be admired for so little and excused for so much. Beatrice read that sentence twice. Then she placed the letter in a drawer, not among wounds, but among beginnings. Across the gallery, Julian stood with the portrait painter, Mr. Ambrose, beneath the tall north-facing windows. The room had once held generations of Harcourts, men in robes, women in satin, children posed with spaniels and future expectations. Today an easel stood where a stern old duke had been removed at the Dowager Duchess's instruction. He looked as though he disapproved of joy, she had said. Let him disapprove from the west corridor. Beatrice had not argued. Mr. Ambrose turned from the canvas, brush poised. "Your Grace, the light falls strongly across the left side. I can soften the mark if you wish. Only a little. It is often done." Julian's gaze moved to Beatrice, but he did not answer for her. He had learned. That learning had become one of the quiet foundations of their marriage. When letters arrived concerning the trust, he placed them in her hand unopened. When tenants asked questions that concerned household patronage, he looked to her first. When London praised him for rescuing her, he replied so consistently that the story had begun to correct itself. "My wife rescued the truth," he would say. "I merely arrived late with witnesses." Beatrice stepped closer to the easel. The painted woman emerging there was not a beauty transformed by love into someone unrecognizable. She was herself. Dark hair drawn back from her face. Blue gown simple enough to reveal posture before fashion. Pale mark along her cheek, caught in honest light. Eyes direct. Not pleading. Not guarded. Present. "No," she said. "Do not soften it." Mr. Ambrose nodded. "As your grace wishes." Julian waited until the painter withdrew to clean his brush before coming to stand beside her. "Are you certain?" Beatrice looked at the canvas, then at the miniature resting in its small velvet case on the table nearby. Lady Mirabel's painted face watched from beneath glass, the damaged backing preserved beside a careful copy of the inscription Mr. Grain had made. The original scratches remained. Beatrice had refused restoration beyond protection. Some wounds, once survived, deserved not to be beautified into lies. "I have lived too long in other people's corrections," she said. Julian's expression softened, but he did not reach for her in front of the open gallery door. Restraint had not left their marriage. It had become tenderness with manners. "Then the portrait will tell the truth." A dangerous habit for a wall. This house could benefit from it. She turned slightly toward him. "You removed a duke for me." He had a sour mouth. "He was your great-grandfather." "A man may be both." Beatrice laughed, and the sound surprised her even now. There had been a time when laughter had felt like a mistake she might be made to apologize for. At Lydmere Park, it crossed rooms freely. Julian watched her as if that freedom were a victory he did not intend to claim. "The village schoolmistress called this morning," he said. "Mrs. Arlen tells me you have doubled the book allowance." "I have. And established a small fund for girls whose families believe education makes them troublesome." "It does make them troublesome. I suspected as much. I thought it a worthy use of my mother's trust." Julian looked toward the miniature. She would approve. Beatrice touched the velvet case with one finger. "I hope so. I know so." She glanced at him. That is very confident for a man who once required verification. He bowed his head slightly, accepting the wound and the jest together. "I've learned that some truths arrive before documents." The answer settled between them, warm and earned. From the far end of the gallery came the sound of the Dowager Duchess's cane. She entered with Lady Helena, both women dressed for tea and both wearing the satisfied expressions of generals inspecting a battlefield now converted to garden. Lady Helena looked at the canvas and stopped. "There you are." Beatrice smiled. "Was I missing?" "In most portraits, yes. Not in that one." The Dowager Duchess examined the painting through her lorgnette. "The mark is well done. Not sentimental. Not apologetic. Good. I detest portraits that beg to be liked." "Then it may remain?" Julian asked gravely. His mother gave him a dry look. "My dear boy, it is your house only in law. Taste belongs to the women who improve it." Lady Helena sat near the table and opened Cressida's letter without asking, because Beatrice had given her permission to do so weeks ago. The Dowager Duchess rang for tea. Mr. Ambrose returned to his work. Sunlight shifted over the floorboards. Nothing dramatic happened, and that, Beatrice thought, was the mercy of a true ending. Not applause. Not astonishment. Not a room of enemies forced to bow. Those things had had their place, and she did not despise them. But the deeper justice was quieter. It was a house where her portrait stayed on the wall. A husband who did not confuse protection with possession. An inheritance turned toward girls who had been told gratitude should replace ambition. A sister writing clumsy truth from Bath. A father whose voice no longer lived inside every mirror. Later, when tea had been taken and the painter had gone, Beatrice remained alone with Julian in the gallery. The miniature stood beneath her unfinished portrait, mother and daughter held in the same clean light. Julian read the copied inscription softly, not as discovery now, but as remembrance. "For my Beatrice, loved before she was seen." Beatrice leaned into the space beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. For a long time, I thought being seen would decide whether I could be loved. And now? She looked at the portrait, at the unsoftened cheek, the steady eyes, the woman who no longer waited in the shadow of someone else's judgment. Now I think love was the first truth. Being seen only returned me to it. Julian took her hand then, private and sure. Outside, the bells from the village church carried faintly across the park, and inside the gallery of Lydmere House, Lady Beatrice Harcourt stood in the light exactly as she was, with her mother's words below her and her own life before her, no longer hidden, no longer corrected, and no longer waiting for anyone to decide whether she was worthy of tenderness.